Assalamu alaikum, I'm Chris Banbury and welcome to the debate. Today we're discussing the UK budget for the financial year 2026 to 2027, a statement that has already ignited fierce political debate. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has mounted a strong defence of her approach, sticking rigidly to fiscal rules, rejecting spending cuts and opting squarely for tax rises to balance the books. At the heart of her plan is the 3-year freeze in income tax thresholds, the single biggest revenue-raising measure. Critics called it a stealth tax, dragging millions into higher bands without touching headline rates. Alongside this, Reeves introduced a mansion tax surcharge on properties over £2 million, a move long demanded by Labour MPs and trade unions. Yet some argue it doesn't go far enough, while others warn it could distort the housing market. Pension reforms, including national insurance and salary sacrifice contributions, are framed as fairness measures, but experts caution they may change saving behaviour among higher earners. Politically, Reeves scored a symbolic victory by abolishing the two-child benefit cap, a policy reversal that delighted Labour MPs and expected to lift 450,000 children out of poverty. But Conservatives are already attacking the decision as proof of rising welfare spending funded by higher taxes on workers. From milkshake levies to electric vehicle duties, from regional AI growth zones to nuclear investment promises, this budget is a mix of symbolism, fairness, arguments and fiscal discipline. But the question remains, does the budget truly rebuild Britain's economy? Or does it burden working families while promising growth that may never arrive? Here's the key points of Rachel Reeves had to say in her televised budget speech.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we are rebuilding our economy. Over the last 16 months, we have overhauled our planning system to get Britain building, forged new trade deals with the United States, India and the European Union, reformed our visa system to bring the brightest and the best to Britain, changed our fiscal rules that we inherited from the Conservatives. And in last year's budget, I raised taxes on business and the wealthiest to close the £22 billion black hole in the public finances left by the party opposites. And we used that money to fund the biggest ever settlement for our National Health Service. Today's budget builds on the choices that we have made since July last year to cut NHS waiting lists, to cut the cost of living and to cut debt and borrowing. No doubt we will face opposition again, but I have yet to see a credible or a fairer alternative plan for working people. I said there would be no return to austerity, and I meant it. This budget will maintain investment in our economy and in our National Health Service. I said I would cut the cost of living, and I meant it. This budget will bring down inflation and provide immediate relief for families. I said I would cut debt and borrowing, and I meant it. Because of this budget, borrowing will fall as a share of GDP in every year of this forecast.
Joining me today are 4 distinguished guests. Our first guest is Hina Bukhari, OBE. Hina is a Liberal Democrat group lead in the London Assembly. Our second guest is Michael Jacobs. Michael is a Professor of Political Economy at the University of Sheffield. Also joining us today is Rizwan Bhutta. He's a Chartered Tax Advisor and Tax Director at I Will Solicitors. And last but not least, we have with us Arfi Majid. Arfi is a Chartered Accountant and Certified Financial Coach. Also, she's a founder and CEO of the Wealth Oasis Club. Let me ask all of you, what is your takeaway, your personal takeaway of yesterday's budget? Let's start with Hina.
Well, our perception of this is that it's been a botched up budget. It's not going to grow the economy. We're worried about the fact that it hasn't focused on the major issue of why we're in this situation, which is the breakdown of our relationship with Europe. We've been pushing for a new UK EU customs union that would cut the red tape, that would ensure that there's going to be growth in the economy. And we need to make sure that we're seeing real changes in this perspective to make sure that families are going to be pulled out of poverty. We really literally cannot tax our way into growth. And that is our main problem with this budget.
Michael, can I just ask what your takeaway is?
Well, let's take a political perspective on this. Very happy to discuss the economics of it as well. And I agree that a major part of why we're in this situation of having to raise taxes is because of the impact of Brexit, which has had a major impact on the economy, on growth, and therefore on the revenues that the government has. But politically, I think this has kept Starmer and Reeves alive for a while. It is a budget that Labour MPs will like. It does two big things. One is it restores or it gets rid of the two-child benefit cap, which was causing a lot of children to go into poverty. So hundreds of thousands of children will now be taken out of poverty by lifting that cap, which is obviously something that Labour MPs, Labour supporters will like. And it also puts the burden of taxation largely on higher income earners and on people with income from wealth. So if you had to raise taxes, so most Labour MPs would say, well, we wouldn't have started from here. But if you do start from here and the government did need to raise taxes, then putting it on higher earners and on people with wealth and large homes and so on is the thing that most MPs on the Labour side will like. So I think this has given Starmer and Reeves a little bit of headroom, as it were, to get through to the next election in May. But I think longer term, after that election, their positions are still pretty precarious.
Ruslan, what's your takeaway of yesterday's budget?
Thank you very much, Chris. Look, I think the simple fact that this is the highest tax burden since the Second World War, I think says it all. The fact that it's been compared against the other marker, which is the Second World War, says a lot. It is a very, very difficult time for the economy at the moment. And I am concerned with the levels of tax, and everyone else is. The way that they're going about it, they've really forced themselves into a corner with the manifesto promises. So instead of having a simple budget where it was just, look, let's just raise income tax across the board, it really is death by 1,000 cuts. So yeah,
if I could interject, I mean, it was obvious that by increasing income tax, there was going to be a huge political storm within the Labour Party. They couldn't get away with that.
Exactly, but they put themselves in that corner with the manifesto promise. So now tough decisions were required, and a tough decision had to be made. But I just feel that they've kind of, let's just in a stealth way, try and increase it in the way that we need it, rather than just being honest with the public.
And Arfi, last but not least, can I ask you for your takeaway of yesterday's budget?
Sure. So my job as a certified financial coach is to help people understand their numbers and give them clarity, and basically map out a direction of how they can build their wealth. My personal take is that the government is passing down the burden of filling out this this hole that they have by introducing some crazy taxes. I think they've done what they can in terms of not raising basic, higher, and additional rate taxes, but they have done on savings and property income. They've introduced new things that I find quite surprising. I feel like the burden is being passed down to people that just do not deserve it, whereas there are other areas in government where money can be made and is being spent that perhaps they should target to fill in this hole, rather than going down the rabbit hole of individual people's income. That's my personal take on it.
Thank you. Hina, can I come back to you? I mean, Rachel Reeves, in those statements, she said this government has cut the cost of living. Now, I don't recognise that somehow.
No. I mean, she also said that this was a budget for the ordinary people, and it's the ordinary people that are going to have to pay the brunt of this. Well, at the end of the day, there's a 90 billion Brexit black hole, and that is what the government is refusing to fix. And the people who are having to be hit by this budget are going to be the pensioners, the low-income families, the young workers, all the people who have actually been struggling the most with the cost of living. And according to the OBR, it says that taxpayers will pay £67 billion more by 2030. That definitely isn't a way of helping reduce the cost of living. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to see the voters feeling that in their pockets. So come May, there may not be a way out for the Labour Party in the hopes that they have that this will help them. I just don't think it will happen.
And Michael, I mean, we have a huge budget deficit. That's a common thing across Europe. Does that matter? Because the United States have got an even whoppingly greater budget deficit, and it doesn't seem to be damaging their economy.
Well, there is a difference between the US economy and the rest of the world. The US has the dollar, and as long as people from outside the US, China notably, but also other countries are willing to fund the US deficit because they want dollars, then the US is more able to sustain a deficit than other countries. Can I just correct the point that was just made? It isn't pensioners who are going to pay for this. Pensioners are protected by the triple lock, which means that their incomes are always rising at least as much as average incomes, but sometimes more. It isn't also young workers and the low paid who are going to pay the extra tax. If you are a young worker, or indeed any worker on the minimum wage, your minimum wage is going up a lot this year, having already gone up a lot over the last few years. And if you have a third child, then you are clearly going to benefit a lot from the raising of the third child cap. So the burden that is being paid under this budget is the middle income areas and the top. So if you are, I mean, I feel very sorry for somebody with a £2 million home, but if there's somebody who's got to pay more in tax, that would be the person I would say. If you are a landlord and making money from letting out homes, well, sorry for you, but you're going to have to pay a bit more tax because you are wealthy. And broadly speaking, we do agree that the wealthy should pay more proportionally in tax, and that is what this budget in part will do. But there will be absolutely a set of people in the middle of the income range, which include people who are not rich at all, who will pay more in tax. And we've got this rather odd situation now, where although Labour can say we didn't break the manifesto promise because we haven't raised the rates of tax, by freezing the thresholds at which you enter a tax band, and that's both the first threshold by when you first start paying income tax, so the personal allowance, and then the threshold at which you start paying the higher rate of tax, those are going to be frozen. And of course, with inflation and people's earnings move up the scale, more and more people will be brought into paying tax at all and will be brought into the higher rate. And that is a group of people in the middle who are not rich. And that is the choice that Labour have made. So I would agree that those people will find, not next year, not the year after, but the year after that, when those thresholds are frozen, that they will be paying more in tax. And I think that will be definitely felt as part of the cost of living for them. And I think it'll be politically felt as Labour goes into a general election in the year or two after that. And in that sense, it's politically very much a kind of better now, but not better in the future. Future pain, jam, not very much jam, a very small amount of jam today, but definitely not jam in a few years' time. And obviously, the real verdict on the Labour Party is not now. It's in the general election in 29 or 20, in 28, 29. And that will be the problem when this budget comes back. The chickens will come home to roost, I suspect, at that time.
I mean, Rusman, Michael's making the point that it's the middle section of the population. People essentially, the key wage earners are going to pay more tax. Do you agree with that assessment? And do you think that's right?
In all honesty, I don't. I think it's everyone that's going to be paying more tax. And the fact that we're saying that actually it's going to kick in a few years' time, actually the Conservatives previously froze the thresholds until 2028. And actually the amount of tax that has raised over the last, we're around 3 years into it, it has been absolutely staggering. Now, just to make sure that everyone understands exactly how much tax is being raised, in 2026, 2027, just the freezing of the income tax threshold alone, that will raise £32 billion in a single tax year. And in 2029, 2030, that figure will increase to almost £39 billion in a single tax year. So this isn't just, oh yeah, it's just a freezing of the thresholds. No, this is absolutely huge. And that's just the income tax threshold freeze. That's raising those numbers. Add on the NIC threshold freeze, add on the inheritance tax threshold freeze. There's going to be a lot more tax being paid by people right across the board.
But inheritance, I mean, I would agree with that on income tax and national insurance, and it is important to say that Labour will say we can only be blamed for the bit after 2028, but people will feel that earlier from a previous decision. Inheritance tax is paid by 4% of the population, so that is not a general tax increase.
Okay. Rizwan, finish your point, please.
Yeah, no. And it's a fair point that, yes, that does get quoted a lot. Inheritance tax will only be paid by 4%. But that's 4% at the time when they quoted and done that assessment. You look at now when business relief is changing next year in April 2026, business owners are going to be paying a hell of a lot more tax, inheritance tax, if they pass away with the business. You add on the pension inheritance tax changes coming in from April 2027, it is not going to be in the single digits anymore. It's going to be far, far, far more. So unfortunately, when you bring this all together, the freezing of thresholds across the board, this is the amounts raised are going to be staggering. No doubt about it.
Arfi, this sounds like a hit for hardworking people, hardworking families who are earning a fortune here.
Absolutely, I completely agree with Rizwan on this one. I don't think it's just the middle income people that are going to be at a loss here. For a lot of people who are reaching their pensionable age, they do not know what to do with their estates, and simply because of the changes in inheritance tax, where your pension now becomes part of your estate. To try and figure out how to mitigate the tax on their estate is just become very, very difficult. With my clients in particular, I see before, like 5 years ago, we would see maybe one consultation with a tax planner to sort out their IHT. Now we see them going through almost 3 months worth of consultations before they can decide exactly what to do with their estates. And these people are not incredibly like super wealthy. These are people who have worked really, really hard all their lives. They've worked up until pensionable age. They've built an estate, and they don't know how to even pass it on to their children without facing these huge tax bills. And coming to young people, the national minimum wage hasn't actually increased that much. So for somebody who under 18 before, at the moment, 7.55 minimum wage, that's only going up to £8. If you're 21, your minimum wage is £12.71, and that's only up 50p from £12.21. So we're not seeing any significant help coming for the younger people, for younger people, especially for people entering the workforce.
Hina, you're a member of the London Assembly. I mean, London is going to be where this mansion tax is going to hit hardest. Are you worried about the consequences for London here?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's lots of concern about the mansion tax, particularly in London. And if you were to ask politicians in London, we will tell you that we feel as if London's having to pay for the rest of the country when it comes to this approach with the mansion tax. And I think at the end of the day, what we really want to see is a fair reform of the tax system with council tax. That would have been a better approach than rather than going down the mansion tax approach. We've also been pushing for, which we did not see, which would have been a far better way of actually raising more income, which would have been a windfall tax on the digital services and tech giants, and not on ordinary families, maybe even a windfall tax on big banks. That would have been a better way of going, for an approach that would have really been more of a wealth tax approach than we've actually seen. The mansion tax isn't a guarantee that we're going to see any real change.
Michael, you're in Sheffield. I mean, London is the centre of wealth in this country. Why shouldn't it take a hit?
Well, it's not London taking a hit, it's wealthy people. and they will take a hit wherever they live. And then in Sheffield, there are a few people, not very many, because house prices are much, much lower here, who live in homes worth more than 2 million. It's not London that's taking a hit, it's wealthy people who are concentrated in London. And of course, if you ask, well, why are people living in £2 million homes? It's not because, or above, which are the ones that are going to be hit by the extra tax. It's not because they have become wealthy through any effort of their own. They have become wealthy because their houses have risen in value. The same houses that they lived in before, in many cases. It's not a question of entrepreneurialism, hard work, or whatever. People's homes have become wealthier because asset prices have risen in general. And they have seen huge benefits. Anybody living in a £2 million home who's lived in it for any length of time will have seen huge benefits as a result of that. You can spend much more if you've got if your home is going up. You can afford a much nicer home and so on. So what they're being asked to do is to pay a bit more extra tax because they have become wealthier. And again, I ask the question: would I like if I lived in a £2 million home, which I don't, and nobody I know in London does. By the way, this is a pretty small minority of Londoners that live in £2 million homes. I mean, it'd be interesting to find out what the average is. It's well under that. Would you like to pay more in tax? No. If somebody has to pay more in tax, should it be people who are wealthier? Yes.
That's a fair point. Look,
I do think that's remarkable that he's just said that they are wealthier. They are not wealthier. That they don't have more money suddenly appearing in their bank account. Where did that? How can you even say that? I just found that quite remarkable.
Well,
okay, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to have to take a short break now. Thank you for all that. But stay with us as we move into other issues from yesterday's budget, and we continue to have a discussion. Welcome back to the debate. Rizwan, I'd like to ask you, where do you stand on this? Do you think it's right that people in £2 million houses should pay more tax?
I don't think it's a question of whether it's right or not. I think clearly just the fact that this one measure is only, and I know for a lot of people, yes, it's still a lot of money. It's 400 million that this is going to collect. But when you look at the income tax threshold freeze alone, 30 billion. So this is purely a political motive. This isn't to say we need that money. There's so many other things that could have been done. So I think it's more of a tick in the box to say, look, we went after the wealthy just to get some votes, rather than looking at it as a tax raising measure. Completely not. To say that this is a way that the people with the broadest shoulders are going to pay more tax, it's 400 million compared to 30 billion that everyone is going to take the hit on. So I think that stat on its own says it all.
I think for lots of people in the UK looking at London, they'll say, what's wrong with doing this? Because it is essentially a tax on the wealthiest, who are concentrated in London. And the criticism for years has been that London is the whole of the British economy is too London-centric.
Yeah, well, there is also evidence to say that we are suffering from an affordability crisis in London as well. There is a massive issue of poverty within our city. I think people forget that too. 1 in 3 children are living in poverty in London. I mean, if there's anything I want to say that it was positive out of the budget, was the fact that we've just done the 2-child benefit scrapping of the cap. That was something that the Liberal Democrats have been pushing for from the beginning. We always knew that this was a massive problem when it came to increasing poverty. And in London, that will make a difference. Okay. And I think that is something that I will say thank you, because we needed that to happen.
Alfie, I'm going to let you have a word in here, but I'm going to come back to Michael. Where do you stand on this taxing to £2 million and above homes?
I just don't know how much difference it's really going to make, because if you have a home that is worth more than 2 million, that would so I kind of agree with Michael, where this is something that you could have bought many years ago, and because property prices have gone up so much, it has now breached the 2 million barrier, and that means, yes, your net worth might have gone up by 2 million, but your disposable income might not have gone up. In fact, maybe your disposable income has gone in the opposite direction. So what options do you now have? So one option is you could sell up, you could downsize. Another option is you could sell up and then what's the point of you even continuing to live in this country? You could go somewhere you could move abroad, go to a tax-free or a more tax-friendly jurisdiction, take your money there, and in which case the government have kind of shot themselves in the foot. And we're seeing this. We're seeing this with the exodus of super wealthy now leaving the UK in its entirety and moving to tax-free jurisdictions. So I don't think this helps. I don't see what it does.
Michael, you're in a distinct minority here, but I mean, can I just say that the argument Arthur's just put there, that's always been an argument against any sort of wealth tax, which has come from the Conservatives and the right, that if you increase taxes on the wealth, they'll leave the country. How likely is it, do you think, they're going to quit South Kensington because of a tax on 2 million, which is not actually that much money being raised?
Well, I think Rizwan's point that it's not very much money is a good one, and there were things that could have been done that would have raised more money from the wealthy, and a bigger reform of property taxation is clearly overdue. That probably couldn't have been done in this budget because it hadn't been prepared for. I would have liked to have seen them, the government, say that they were planning and they were going to consult on a wider review of property and land taxation. I do think the point being made kind of reveals the clients that Alfie has, who are clearly very wealthy, people who can think of moving abroad to tax-free jurisdictions. The vast majority, like 99% of the population, do not have financial advisors who say, well, why don't you just move abroad? So this is a particular perspective, but it's not a majority one. I looked up in the break the average home price in London. It's 665,000, which to a person in Sheffield looks like an extraordinary amount of money. In Sheffield, you could buy a palace for that, if there were any palaces, but it's nowhere near 2 million. So this is a very, very small minority of people. And the numbers, we've had lots of scare stories about people moving abroad, and clearly a few have moved abroad, but they are largely scare stories put about by the lobbyists and the wealth advisors for the very rich. The numbers of people who've moved abroad as a result of a Labour government saying they're going to tax wealth a bit more are very, very small. And so I don't think this is a big issue for the Labour government or for the economy as a whole.
Arthur, is this just a scare story?
No, I don't. I think there's so many changes so from April this year, if you have foreign income, your foreign income and your foreign capital gains is now taxed under has now been brought into within your income tax thresholds. Sorry, Michael, not all my clients are super wealthy. A lot of them are, your average 25-year-old tech engineer working, under 30K at Google. And what they are looking for is effective ways of managing their money and mitigating the amount of tax that they have to pay. With the 2 million, the impact that is, I don't think it's a bad thing. I just don't think it's been very well thought out. A lot of those people who, people who own these properties might not even live in the UK, and this could just be part of their international tax mitigation exercise. So I personally just don't see the benefit that it will bring, because the people who are wealthy enough to own 2 million either do not have disposable income, in which case they'll downsize and they won't have to pay the tax, or they are wealthy enough to have tax advisors to find another loophole in which they can mitigate this tax that's coming on properties that's above 2 million.
Rizwan, are you packing your suitcases and planning to leave the country?
On holiday, perhaps, but not to become non-UK tax resident. But look, there are people that are leaving. But let me make this clear, that I think we end up stereotyping that the people that are leaving are these wealthy business owners. There's a lot of talent just leaving the country as well. People that are just going to work for companies abroad and it's not because of the money. It's actually because of safety, crime, weather, simple things like that as well. So when you see a decline in living standards here in the UK, that's probably more of the push of them moving abroad. It's not for tax reasons. I can say that for sure.
I'd like to come in here as well.
Yes, Hina, you are going next. So just let Rizwan finish his point, if I may, Hina, and I'll bring you in. But let Rizwan finish.
No, I think that's the main point there. That
okay.
It's definitely not
okay. Over to you, Hina, then.
I just wanted to point out that there is actually rising evidence of the fact that actually families are moving out of cities like London because they can't afford to live in the city anymore. There's no affordable housing, and that means that there is actually a physical brain drain leaving our cities like London. That is what's happening. What are we going to do to make sure that we're keeping professionals to stay in the city who want to raise their families in the city? That's the question. And what has the government done to do anything to support those people? Nothing.
I mean,
8
Michael, that's
primary schools have just closed down in one borough in London, in Southwark. 8 primary schools have closed because there are less children living in this city. That is what I'm worried about right now. That is what the government is totally ignoring. Why aren't we thinking about those particular issues?
Michael, isn't this an indictment of a housing policy in this country which has failed? I mean, we've put the emphasis for nearly 40 years on buying properties, but that's the goal. We haven't addressed any of the real issues, the lack of affordable housing, etc. Isn't that the problem which neither Conservative governments or Labour governments have addressed? They've stuck their heads in the sand.
Yes, completely agree with that. Let's just clarify the last 2 points. There are people who are leaving London. But not very many of those are leaving the country. They are mostly leaving for other parts of the country because they are finding it impossible to live in London because it's too expensive, particularly if you've got a family. Those people are not being lost to the British economy. They are being spread around the British economy. And given the overconcentration of wealth and businesses in London, that's probably quite a good thing. And I know it's difficult for you, Hena, because you're a London Assembly member, but the country as a whole is not losing those people and their talent. They are being redistributed around the country, and that's actually quite a good thing because it helps the talent spread more widely. So yes, maybe a London problem, not a British problem. But the point on housing is absolutely right, and it's very acute in London. It's less acute in other parts of the country, but house prices have risen everywhere, and rents are now unaffordable, not just in London but in other parts of the country. And I think you do have to say that we failed on housing policy under both Labour and Conservative governments. And the current government's approach is not a particularly sensible one, I'm afraid. They're trying to build 1.5 million homes, 300,000 a year over the time of this Parliament, but they are doing it simply by giving incentives to the private house builders, and private house builders don't want to build more homes. They have had the opportunity to build homes for the last 20 years, and they haven't done so. Why? Because they're a kind of cartel. The point, if you are a private house builder, and we've got some very large ones, you want to maximize the price at which you sell, and so you want to limit the supply. So they don't build homes as many as they can. The government is relaxing the planning laws in order to get more homes built, but there are enough planning permissions already available, already given by local authorities for all the homes that they want to build in this Parliament. There are 1.5 million existing planning permissions. So the problem is not in the planning system. The problem is that we've left house building to the private house builders who don't want to build homes. And they certainly don't want to build affordable homes, because what they're interested in is, naturally enough, their private companies, their profits, and that is a function of the price that they can get for their homes. And the more homes they put on the market, the lower the prices will be. So the problem is a cross-party one. I don't think this government has got a policy that will achieve it. Previous governments didn't. And until we get to grips with the housing market and with how we build homes and the kind of rents that are charged in the cities, then I don't think we will. And I think this is a real problem for the country.
Well, I want to move on from housing, but just let's just ask, anyone got one final point to come back in that before we do move on? Okay, I think we can. Rizwan, the fiscal rules, Rachel Reeves talks about them all the time. These are now being held rigid by both successive governments, Conservative and Labour. Do you think they're necessary?
I think if you just ask a normal person, should we be spending more than you earn? I think everyone would say, of course you shouldn't. So there has to be rules by which the government is operating as well. It's got income and it's got outgoings. It has to be sensible. Saying that we're just going to keep borrowing more, just the fact that the Rachel Reeves was saying in the pre-budget statement that £1 out of every 10 that's generated by the UK government is spent on government debt interest. That's absolutely shocking. 1 out of every 10 just on interest. Something has to be done about that. And hard decisions are required to try and deal with that. But I don't see anything in this budget that is actually tackling that. It's raising just more borrowing coming through. It's raising more taxes purely just to keep things going. That's all I'm seeing. It's not addressing the fact that we are still 3 trillion in debt. That's just staggering numbers.
Arfi, if I had that sort of debt level in comparison to my income, I'd be bankrupt. I mean, that's the simple fact, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. But the government is exceptional to the everyday person, and the government also has a deep relationship with the central banks. So I think when someone studies exactly how money works, how money is generated, how money is pumped into the economy, that's where the government has control. And I feel the deficit that they're trying to fill at the moment, this budget just doesn't work to fill that deficit. And there's other things that they can do and which they have leverage over that they could utilize if they wanted to fill deficit.
I mean, Hina, are you worried about the state of the budget deficit in this country?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're saying they're being responsible. But then you see decisions, for example, that they're going to be spending £1.8 billion on a digital ID bureaucracy. Now, how is that responsible? And then they're going to be giving a £6 billion tax break to tech giants as well by scrapping the digital services tax instead of going to the big banks and getting them to pay. So I don't see the discipline. I see a misordering of priorities.
I mean, Michael, leaving aside the hype about AI, which is increasingly looking a bit dodgy, where do you stand on these fiscal rules? Because they are, I mean, these have now become the 10 commandments of both Conservative and Labour governments.
Can I just correct, Hena? The Labour government is not abolishing the digital services tax.
No, it's a review.
Your leader today, Ed Davey, put this out on Twitter, on X, and it's false. It's simply false. There is going to be a review because the law, which introduced the digital services tax 5 years ago, required there to be a review after 5 years. There is nothing in what the government has said today that indicates that they're going to get rid of it. I checked this today when Ed Davey put that tweet out with somebody at the Treasury, and the Treasury has confirmed that there is no plan to get rid of that tax. So that is false, and I hope that Ed Davey will retract that statement that he made, and that you will also acknowledge that. Let's just come to the fiscal rules. I agree with Rizwan. I think if it's important for government to have some guardrails, to not just be able to do whatever they feel like doing in any 1 year, particularly given that governments are, as you approach an election, there is always a temptation to give money away, to spend more or whatever. So I think the idea of fiscal rules is a good one, introduced first by Gordon Brown, who actually kept to his fiscal rules, unlike every other chancellor since, who's always changed. Every chancellor, including Rachel Reeves, have changed the fiscal rules because they didn't feel they could meet the existing ones. So I think it's right that Rachel Reeves is sticking to her fiscal rules. And also for the reason that Rizwan says, which is that the main point of the fiscal rules is to stop you borrowing more. The government is not borrowing more now as a result of this, and that's why taxes are going up. The government had 3 options, as governments always do. If the numbers don't add up, you can cut spending, you can borrow more, or you can tax more. Broadly speaking, they've chosen to raise taxes rather than borrowing. Now, borrowing will rise a little bit over the next few years in the existing plans, but then will fall. And so the choice they've made is tax over more borrowing in general, and certainly over cutting spending. And this is the point that we've not discussed so far. So why do we have taxes at all? We have taxes because we have public services, and we need to spend money on the National Health Service, on education, on policing, and so on and so forth. And in a society which wants to see rising, improved public services, we have to be able to pay for them, and it is taxation that is for this. So we must never forget when we discuss taxes that there's a reason that taxes exist. It's to pay for public services. And if you don't like borrowing and you don't like taxes, then you have to be honest and say, well, I would like public services to get worse.
Can I just
Because
ask,
you
do you
can't-
accept, do you accept the
can't-
point that Michael's made about that and Ed Davey?
I mean, at the end of the day, there is still going to be £1.8 billion spent on digital ID. There are still decisions.
Yeah, that's not the digital services tax, though, and that's not benefiting
there are
tech
still decisions
companies.
being made by this government that doesn't prioritise
Okay.
the way that we could actually be making sure that, for example,
And the reason they're bringing in a digital ID is to
Okay.
control immigration.
Can we speak one at a
why are
time,
we
please?
hitting
One
all
at
the
a
most
time.
vulnerable people in society? Why are we having to have people who have been already suffering through a cost of living crisis have to pay? They shouldn't have to pay, and they are.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Rizwan, I mean, when you hear Rachel Reeves talking about rebuilding Britain's economy, given the state which I experience every day of our public services, do you think that that really is what people believe is happening in Britain? Because you mentioned, for instance, the amount of crime in London, rising as a consequence of cuts to our police service. I mean, do you think that's the experience of ordinary people?
Experiences in that crime is rising. It's not just in London. People are experiencing it right across the country. Police cuts are right across the country, not just in London. So I don't think there's a bubble here that people are disappointed or feeling the pinch just in London. People are feeling the pinch across the board, right up and down the country. A drop in living standards, crime rate rising, NHS the waiting times are through the very, very, very long. This isn't just an isolated thing in any part of the country. So I think that's why we're discussing this so passionately across the board, and everyone across the country, even not just the people on the panel today. Everyone's disappointed, and yes, people are leaving. Yes, borrowing is going up. It's not a good position to be in at all.
I mean, Alfred, this isn't. Can I just add? This isn't just a problem in the UK. I mean, this is a common picture across Europe, isn't it?
I can't speak for Europe, but yes, it is. It is from. I'm not an expert on the rest of Europe, but I would say if you look at the number of people that are migrating from Europe to the GCC region, for example, and these numbers are significant. Dubai is welcoming over 1 million wealthy individuals now, and I've seen there's a lot of there's a lot of memes going on as well at the moment. There's a lot of infographics that show the world movement. And the bulk of wealthy people, or anyone who has the ability to get out, are trying to move to jurisdictions where the quality of life is better, the tax situation is better, and as Rizwan pointed, crime is low.
You're a politician. You're the only politician on this panel. If we go back to the election as government, a lot of people at that time said that the massive majority was a sandcastle majority. In other words, as the tide came in, it would be simply eroded. Do you think that's what's happening?
I think we're in a very interesting time politically. We're in flux. And if I was to give you my honest opinion, I really don't know what's going to happen politically. We're at a time where things are getting polarized in terms of rhetoric. There's political parties that are blaming each other for and blaming some of the most vulnerable people for the reasons that we're going through an incredibly difficult economic crisis at the moment. So if I was to say, as a politician, I actually really would love to see more people working across political divides to come up with solutions for our economic issues right now. That is actually the way forward. We need to hit our heads together and say, what can we do to fix the mess that we're in? And there needs to be some honesty in these conversations. Now, I've talked about Brexit before. I'm going to keep on talking about it because our relationship with Europe was the key for our economy to thrive, and we've lost that. We've got to do as much as we can politically to get that relationship to be fixed, and that will actually really move our country forward. And we've got to go beyond politics here. This is actually what we could do to fix the mess that we're in.
Well, Michael, I mean, riding high in the polls are Reform UK, who, if they continue to form next government, have they got the answers?
No. And what's really interesting about Reform UK is they've managed to get to the top of the polls now for quite a few months without having any answers at all. Reform is a party built on grievance, on people feeling very annoyed. I'm not going to use a swear word about it, but people are feeling very, very annoyed about the state of the country, about the public services, from potholes to the NHS and so on, about the cost of living increase, which is an inflation which the whole world has suffered, but people feel it in their pockets. And reform are the products of that sense of anger, disappointment, and so on, and also blaming other people. And I would agree with Hena here. Reform likes to blame other people, particularly people of colour, and you can see that amongst the kind of the way Reform spokespeople use rhetoric, often kind of dog whistle politics, appealing to xenophobia and so on. The issue for Reform is when they are actually put into an election, a general election, and they are required to show what their policies are, they don't have any. Nigel Farage has had massive tax cuts, completely unaffordable. He's now rowed back from a few of those as he gets a bit more scrutiny. I think in a general election campaign, Reform will fall apart.
Okay.
Another question will be asked.
I'm going to have to cut in now because we've come to the end of our time. Thank you all for a fascinating discussion of yesterday's budget and trying to look into the future. Can I thank you all as well for joining us to hear that discussion? I hope you've learned something. And please join us again for next week for the debate. This is Chris Banbury wishing you a good evening.